Hello everyone and welcome back to the Football Forecast, and today's video I'll be discussing the new appointment of Ange Postecoglou, who is the new Nottingham Forest manager, and I'll be discussing sort of how I think Forest will potentially line up under Postecoglou, but also the key differences between him and Nuno's style and how this could change Nottingham Forest potentially for the better or the worse in the future. I'm also going to go through each player and do I think the player will fit the tactical system that most likely Ange Postecoglou will want the players to line up in, and what is the key tactical ideology differences but in the way that they like to play their football, and do I think this will leave Forest in the better or worse. But quickly before we discuss this, I would like to also talk about obviously the Nuno situation. Obviously I had done a video on Nuno being sacked in my opinion, and I did say I think it's a bit of a disgrace that he's gone. I have sort of re-thought about this and I've gone, look, Nuno did make a lot of comments where you go, you know what, maybe it wasn't possible to keep him around. Obviously disagreements with Marinakis. I do wonder if there was a more civil way to sort of get over the disagreement and argument than just immediately sacking him, as it has come out recently that he wasn't given a chance to even speak to Marinakis around the problem. Now this could be because Nuno had continuously disrespected Marinakis and he saw it as no way back, but I do sort of think in these sort of situations surely there was a more civil way to resolve this problem. And if I was going to sack Nuno, I wouldn't have replaced him with a manager like Ange Postecoglou, as I don't quite know how it's going to work. I think it would have been a lot more guaranteed of Forest winning, for maybe you could argue another winner who could have delivered the Europa League, potentially like Jose Mourinho, who I would have said would have been almost a perfect tactical fit for this Nottingham Forest system. Just before I start, these players are just placeholders for players that Nuno used most under Forest, and eventually I'll start adding in the players that I think will actually fit Ange Postecoglou's system. So starting off with Nuno's defence, and straight away you see how sort of low the defensive line is. You've got Williams, Murillo, Milinkovic, Aina, all very much back, and Anderson, Sangare and Gibbs-White. And you've got sort of Woods on the halfway line. This is sort of how Forest looked to defend. It was very deep. Aina was almost always here, and it was very much all about stopping the other opponent from scoring, and then trying to take your chances on the break using sort of Dan Ndoye and Hudson-Odoi. And they didn't really bother about this sort of space when they were defending. They didn't press into this half, and it was very much about sitting in a low block. So straight away you can start to see the massive difference between the Ange Postecoglou system and the Nuno system, because look at all this area all of a sudden that Matt Sells especially has to worry about. All of a sudden he's having to cover all of this area around here, having to sweep, having to play out from the back, having to actually use the ball at his feet, which he didn't have to previously do under Nuno Espirito Santo. So who are the perfect players to actually do this system for Ange Postecoglou? And is there any players currently available at Nottingham Forest that can do this? So let's look at the three potential keepers that Ange Postecoglou could use at Nottingham Forest. So starting off with Matt Sells, and straight away I'm going to put him into the starting 11. He was absolutely brilliant for them last year, in a season where he was actually crucial in them even getting into Europe, finishing 7th place. He got them out of a lot of trouble in certain games with sort of a very good back three of him, Murillo and Milinkovic. Does this system suit Matt Sells? Not very much, I don't think, and I think this is where they could have some problems, Nottingham Forest, because I'm not convinced Matt Sells is that sort of sweeper keeper and has got the ability to play out from the back, and I think that could cause him some problems, and he may well end up sort of performing not as well as we're sort of used to, because the shots he will be having to save are going to be different, more one-on-ones maybe, not just sort of reaction saves, which he did very well at last year, so I think he could struggle a bit. Then on to John Victor, and I'm going to put John Victor as a sub. He did very well for Botafogo at the Club World Cup, but his playing out from the back abilities are questionable at times, and the system he played at Botafogo was so similar to the system that Nuno implemented. So I am a bit worried for someone like John Victor. Will he be able to play out from the back and use his feet as well as he needs to? So for that reason, once again, I'm putting him as a sub. And Angus Gunn, he was signed as, it appears, a third choice keeper, and he will probably remain a third choice keeper. So the keeping order isn't going to change that much. None of these keepers are very good at sort of playing out from the back, being a sweeper keeper, which is what Ange Postecoglou is going to demand at Nottingham Forest. So I really could see him going in for a keeper in January, trying to find someone that's more fitting to how he wants to play his football. So moving into the centre halves, and what Nuno required from his centre halves that were Mirolau and Milinkovic were just more about the defensive side of the game. He didn't require them to do too much expensive football and was more worried about their ability to block a shot, but also stay solid in the system and all about defence and don't worry about what you can sort of do going forward. He also had players like Milinkovic who were brilliant in the air and very solid and were sort of 6'4" and could cause Premier League defences also problems going forward. And this was very good use of sort of what Nuno wanted from Forest last year. So, what does Ange require from his centre halves? And immediately you sort of see the difference of where they are positioned. And this is mainly when they're even defending, not even going forward. And this is sort of what he will require. He'll require the defensive line to stay high and look to sort of allow the forwards to get up and sort of press and cause issues that way. Sort of the exact opposite of what Nuno required from his defence. He wants them to also be able to have enough recovery pace to get back, because they've also got to recover sort of all this area. The defenders have also got to sort of worry about sort of what goes behind as well as what is in front of them. And this is sort of the difference in style between the two sides defensively. Ange is always all about defending on the front foot. Nuno's happy to stay on the back foot and sort of playing a low block and sort of allow pressure to come. Ange is all about pressing high, and this will require his defenders to do more defensive work. So, which defenders could work in this Ange system? And I'm not going to waste any time. The centre half that has to start, as long as he's fit in every game, is going to be Murillo. Murillo is going to be essential. Without Murillo, I don't think Ange is going to be able to cope at all. I think this system doesn't get up the best out of the Forest's defenders anyway, because all their defenders are sort of built around sort of sitting in a bit more and hitting on the counter. But I do think Murillo is probably the only defender that could cope with this system. He's got very good ball playing abilities. He's got enough pace in him to get back, but I still don't think it's perfect for him. I still think he's probably better on the other system, but he's the only one I think that can really excel in the system, and he'll be able to get forward with the ball, as we saw him even do sometimes in Nuno last year, and he's a very confident on the ball, and that's why Murillo will be key. Willy Bolly, I'm going to put straight and sell. I just don't see this working. Obviously, you can't sell players outside the window, but they should either be looking to ship them off to Saudi Arabia while the window's still open, or they should just basically not use them. And I think Ange will not use Willy Bolly. It feels very Eric Dyer, too slow on the ball, not actually that good on the ball, but also lacks pace as he's also getting a lot older. Then the other ones you've got is Nicola Savano, who's coming from Juventus. I'm going to put him as sort of a depth option. Actually, no, maybe sub. I think he could do a sub option for Nottingham Forest. He's got a decent bit of pace about him. He's quite young, so he shouldn't have to worry too much about the high line. But once again, I don't think it quite suits his playstyle. Then we've got Abberton, who's another new signing, just sort of coming through. I'm going to put him as depth. At best, he's probably going to be the fifth choice and a half for Nottingham Forest. Then you've got Ja Cunha. Ja Cunha, I think is probably arguably more suited to the system than someone like Milinkovic. But I'm only going to put him as a sub for now, because Ja Cunha will probably struggle to get into the starting 11 at such a young age. And I think even though Milinkovic, I think, is almost the exact polar opposite of what you're looking from the player in this system, I think he's going to keep trusting him. I think as long as Murillo's next to him, potentially he could be alright, maybe do sort of more like a Christian Romero job, but I am worried about that recovery pace and his ability on the ball. I can't really see him stepping into midfield, and I think this is going to cause Forest some problems, and this is going to be part of the reason why they're probably going to concede more goals than they did under Nuno, as they'll be a lot more exposed. The final centre half that Nottingham Forest could use is Marotta. Once again, I think quite similar to the other ones. He's not that good on the ball, and this could be a concern for Forest. I don't know if he's quite got enough pace as well to suit the Postecoglou way, but for now I'm just going to add him to the bench. But I do really think this is somewhere where Ange will address in January. They have to get some centre halves and with a bit more pace about them and the ability to track back. It was, we saw in Spurs how important this was to Ange and how much he prioritised it, having the ability to have pace over just even defending ability. So I really think this will happen. So the right back, or whoever the right fullback is, will sort of have more of a different license than Nico Williams, I think. He still, once again, will definitely be allowed to attack, but I think he may more be attacking sort of in this sort of route, sort of overlapping, and Ndoye will sort of cut into more like this sort of area of the pitch, because this would suit the right-sided fullback a bit more, considering they're right-footed. And I do feel like Nottingham Forest potentially have players that can do this, and I don't sort of see the point of having another person inverting into this sort of area of the pitch, because Morgan Gibbs-White is also sort of already based here, and he will very much command this sort of area of the pitch. So I sort of think this is sort of where you're sort of leaving yourself with a bit more space, and then obviously your striker can have the license to get into the box. This immediately also allows you to start to see sort of this amount of distance and cover that Murillo and Milinkovic now have to worry about, because all of a sudden they're having to worry about the left-sided fullback and also the right-hand-sided fullback. There's all this sort of space and cover which they usually wouldn't occupy, and this is when you're starting to see potential concerns with the centre-half partnership, especially Milinkovic with the lack of pace, having to cover Olaina as well as having to still cover to the centre of the pitch. So, who could potentially be the fullback options for Nottingham Forest in the system? Starting with Zinchenko, and I'm going to put Zinchenko as a bench option. I do actually think he really suits that left-back position. Obviously, a new signing in on deadline day, and I think as an inverted fullback, he would be perfect. He'd very much be able to come into the midfield and sort of do what Ange requires in that position. But where am I a bit concerned, he doesn't quite have the energy, I think, to play maybe in that position. Someone like Spence or Udogie were very quick and they got even further forward. I think Zinchenko is probably better slightly more back, so that might be something he's got to think about, and for that reason I've only put him on the bench for Postecoglou. Left back, the other left back you got is Nico Williams, and I don't think this will change. Nico Williams, as I just said earlier, being right-footed, sort of being exactly sort of what Spence did so well for Spurs last year, that will not change. And Olaina, I'm once again going to start. So far the team hasn't changed, and I think these are probably the two positions so far which I think I'm confident could work in Ange's system. Olaina's got high energy, high pace, and really does sort of work around sort of that sort of idea of getting forward. He hasn't really got a license to get forward for Forest under Nuno, but I think now it will definitely be allowed under Ange Postecoglou, and I think he can definitely make those sort of big overlapping runs to support the attack. So I think Aina will suit that perfectly. As well as this, you can also use Nicolo Savava, who is the Juventus right back, who's here, played for them last year, as well as right centre half. And I think this could be a useful option as a bench option in case Olaina gets injured and you need another right back. Moving into the midfield, and what we've seen so far is all about defence first when it came to Nuno's system, and once again we're going to see a similar thing. Sort of Singare's role here was just all about sort of just destroying, being part of that midfield and just sort of ensuring to break up play and then sort of allow Forest to counter and use their attackers. Elliot Anderson was a very unique midfielder for Forest last year, and the reason why was because of his high energy and ability to get up but also back, and he was sort of given that ability to go up and down continuously. And Gibbs-White, obviously here, was the creative outlet for Forest, and he was the person that allowed the wingers to sort of use their abilities because he got the ball to them. He is very much, though, Gibbs-White, a player, a bit of a luxury player, I would describe him, because similar to Bruno Fernandes, my only criticism of Gibbs-White is he does actually give the ball away a lot, and that can put Forest under pressure, and I do wonder, is that going to be a potential problem for Ange Postecoglou? I think he'll really like Gibbs-White as a player. Obviously, he wanted to sign him a couple of years ago for Spurs, but I do sort of worry for Gibbs-White. Will it actually work with his sort of ability to give the ball away? And I think it will get to a point where Ange will try to sort of train that out of him to not sort of play such sort of like creative passes that can put the team under pressure later, because when they come off they're brilliant, but they don't always come off, as we know, with those sort of passes. They're very much 1 in sort of 5 passes, but when they come off they are brilliant. So how does the midfield change then for Ange Postecoglou? Well, Ange Postecoglou midfields are all about high energy, and that's what I think he'll prioritise in this midfield. Straight away, when you think of high energy in this team, you think Elliot Anderson and Gibbs-White. As I was just mentioning, Elliot Anderson was given a very unique role because he had the ability to get back and get forward, and I think we'll see a very similar thing. So he will continue with that sort of idea, but this time it will be Anderson and Gibbs-White. They will get up the pitch, but they will have to always get back. Obviously, you also have sort of Nico Williams sort of coming into this midfield, allowing Anderson to get even further forward, and this will create a very attacking system for Ange Postecoglou and Nottingham Forest, and that's sort of what we're expecting to see. Elliot Anderson, though, will be a crucial part of this midfield, I am convinced. And then what I think is you'll probably have a 6 who will sort of just be a destroyer and really help those two centre halves. I think this 6 can differ from game to game. You could either pick a 6 that's more about sort of progressing the ball, more sort of about sort of getting the ball forward and part of the press, or you can pick a 6 like someone like Sangare, who's more of a destroyer in that midfield, all about sort of tackling and sort of protecting the back, sort of back four, and also Murillo and Milinkovic. And then this would then allow Murillo and Milinkovic to sort of drop back a bit more in certain games, as we did actually see. In the Europa League, Ange Postecoglou was willing to sort of change his system. So I do wonder if we will see this happen against sort of the top teams. Moving into the possible 6 options, and I think there are quite a few good options here. First one is Nicolas Dominguez. Nicolas Dominguez is very much that defensive midfielder I just described. Someone who's a bit of a brute in the tackle, very much a destroyer, and will allow other players to get forward. The reason I've only put him as depth is because of Ryan Yates. I think they're very similar level, Ryan Yates and Dominguez, and do the same job very well. Just a very good tackler, does the basics well, and sort of does what you want from your 6 in Ange Postecoglou system. But why have I not put him? Why have I put Ryan Yates over Dominguez? It's Ryan Yates' leadership, as well as him as more so being Forest's captain and being Forest through and through, obviously coming through their academy. And I think this is really important to keep someone like Ryan Yates around. So I would actually put Ryan Yates on the bench. Then who have you got next? You've got Sangare. Sangare, I think, will definitely be in the starting 11 if you want a 6 to sort of to be a destroyer and sort of play a more defensive style game. I think, for example, they've got Arsenal on the weekend coming up, Nottingham Forest. Straight away, Sangare has to play the system. That will then allow Murillo and Milinkovic a bit more freedom to sort of come back, and they won't have to worry so much about their defensive duties because they've got a big 6 in front of him. He's just sort of going to occupy in front and sort of help out the defence, and this will allow players like Morgan Gibbs-White to play further forward in sort of the attacking areas and worry less about their defensive duties. Obviously, their pressing is going to be important under Postecoglou's system, as well as his energy, but this will sort of allow Gibbs-White to still have the freedom as well as being able to sort of get back when he can, but it's not an absolute must. He must always get back as soon as he can. Another very good summer acquisition that could play in this midfield is Douglas Luiz, and I think Douglas Luiz has the ability to play slightly deeper, but also in the 8. Where I would play him for Nottingham Forest, though, is in the 8, and I think Douglas Luiz comes into games where you want to dictate the game and play with a bit more possession. So I'm actually once again going to put Douglas Luiz in starting. I think he's a potential starter for Forest on the frequent. I think if you're playing sort of a home game against maybe like Burnley, Sunderland, Bournemouth, you want someone like Douglas Luiz, and that shows some attacking mentality. And who would drop into the 6th? Into the 6th then? I would actually go with Elliot Anderson as the 6th, or in that sort of situation, and I would drop Sangare to the bench. I think Sangare's steal is really important against the top sides, but I do think if you want to control the game a bit more, someone like Elliot Anderson may be a better option in the 6th. Elliot Anderson's brilliant in the tackle, and he's just been called up for England. He's a very good player, Elliot Anderson, and no matter what, he should be in the side. Either is the 8 when Sangare is playing, or is the 6 when Douglas Luiz playing. That's how I would use that Forest midfield. Next midfield option for Nottingham Forest is Omari Hutchinson. Omari Hutchinson can also play on the right-hand side, but I'm going to put him as a midfielder for now, and I don't quite understand the signing because I think they've got better midfielders as well as I think they've got better wingers, so it doesn't really make sense to sign your record fee on someone like Hutchinson. In saying that, though, I think Postecoglou will like him more than Nuno did, and I think it will suit his system better. He's a decent presser, Hutchinson, and he's a good attacker going forward, but just not like sort of level that I think Forest have actually got now in these attacking regions. And one of those players is James McAtee. McAtee, I'm going to put on the bench, but he will very much challenge Gibbs-White. McAtee's a very talented player from Manchester City, and the only reason he never got sort of a sniff in that Manchester City squad is because McAtee wasn't quite good enough to get sort of around sort of Phil Foden, Bernardo Silva, those sort of players. But I definitely think he's good enough to play a big part in Forest this season. And once again, I think McAtee will suit the system with a sort of work rate that he would have developed at Manchester City. And then finally, we've got Bakawu, who's a new signing, 35 million again, so an expensive signing, and he's been cut there. I also think James McAtee could be really useful for when Nottingham Forest are trying to break down a low block, which has been a problem for Nuno as his sort of style is very much playing on the counter. But I think James McAtee will allow Ange to have sort of a different way to sort of break down teams, especially considering that's going to be more of a thing that Forest are going to have to do now, because if they're going to look to press high and dominate the ball, you need players that can create chances for the attacking front three. So moving into the forwards, and because of how Nuno played last year, they didn't very much worry about sort of dominating the ball and sort of getting it into the opposition half. So as soon as Forest had the ball, all of a sudden all this area would open up because the centre halves would often be close to Wood. So all of a sudden you've got all this area because they're trying to dominate the game and sort of break down Forest. And this was the sort of space that Hudson-Odoi and Ndoi, previously obviously Alanga, would run into and use their pace and sort of cut into this space. But also would sort of arrive late into the box and be there to finish off the chances. And that's how Forest sort of had their main. So, how does this attacking front three change with Ange Postecoglou being in charge? Well, as you can see, as we've always seen, the forwards are further up the pitch. Hudson-Odoi and Ndoi a lot further up, as well as Chris Wood, and that's because these are the sort of positions that they're more likely to take up because they're looking to press high and win the ball up. And these are sort of their starting positions because Murillo and Milinkovic, Aina, Williams are all the way sort of up the pitch already in the first place. And the first thing I'm going to really focus on is sort of the press of each player. Chris Wood is sort of very much going to lead the press from the front, or whoever is up front who's suited for that job. Then sort of Hudson-Odoi will sort of come in on an angle, help with the press. Same with Dan Ndoi. Then you sort of have Anderson, who will work hard, and Gibbs White, who will work hard. This will sort of form sort of the 5-man press. Then sort of Sangare will come in, and he will cover. And then so you'll see Williams sort of step up, Murillo step up, Anderson step up, Milinkovic step up, and Aina step up. And this will sort of allow Forest to win the ball back up high. But where does this leave you exposed? As we have seen so far, the area that will be left exposed is this sort of down this part of the pitch as you sort of get that high press happening. And for breaking down teams, obviously now Forest have to worry about how they break down teams because they're going to have so much more the ball most likely and so much more high the pitch. It's now more about the wingers and the attackers sort of trying to find space and sort of trying to combine. Hudson-Odoi won't just be able to sort of run past players because he'll be more given tight in marking because they're dominating the ball. That's just sort of naturally what happens. So Anderson, Gibbs White, Sangare, Ndoi, Hudson-Odoi and Wood will sort of just have to sort of work the ball around, trying to find openings and holes to break through the defence. And this could cause Forest some troubles at the start, I think, because I don't know if Forest are quite capable of sort of breaking down sides, as we've sort of seen against these sort of lower block sides like Everton, who have caused them problems. The wingers are very much going to have to be able to take players on and dribble past players, but also combine well and try unlock sides. And then you need your striker to be there to sort of be able to sort of get the tap in, but also combine, maybe help unlock. Or you could get the striker in the Postecoglou system, just sort of wait there and just wait to sort of pounce. But I do think a striker that can help with link-up play could be important for how Postecoglou wants to play. So, looking at Nottingham Forest's attacking options, one of them is Dylan Bakawu, signed for 35 million. A bit of pace about him. He's obviously new, just come in, and I think he could challenge Dan Ndoi, and he gives good depth for that right wing side. Obviously, signed as one of the replacements for Anthony Alanga, who went to Newcastle. For now, just a bench option. Dan Ndoi, obviously really impressed so far at Bologna. I think he can suit Ange's system well. Got pace, power, decent in the air, and I think this will be a real good player for Ange, and it will work out well for him at Forest under him. Hudson-Odoi, another player that I actually think works really well. I think the attack in general can work under Ange. I know Hudson-Odoi played quite a lot on the counter, but his ability to cut inside and score can be really useful as sort of an inverted winger option like Son, like those sort of players. But he can also square it, get on the sort of wing and sort of cut it back to the striker. I think this will work well, and I'm going to bring him starting. Then we've got Jota Silva. I think this is a sell, to be honest. I think Jota Silva should probably leave Nottingham Forest. I just don't think it's quite going to work out for him at Nottingham Forest. I think he's a decent player, Jota Silva, but they've sort of gone past that level of player, and I think it's probably better that he goes. Then we've got Kalamadu. I'm going to put in a bench option. He's a real talent, though, pressing forward, leads the attack well, but I just can't quite see him starting yet. I think there's probably a better striking option, but I do like his press, and he can also play off the left, so good depth up there. Probably Hudson-Odoi's natural replacement if he was to go down injured. Then Taiwo Awoniyi. The problem with Taiwo Awoniyi, as we all know, is injuries. And I am going to put him as sell because I actually think he's probably now their fourth choice striker option. And I think Taiwo Awoniyi, it's probably best for all parties that he leaves. Chris Wood. Now, a lot of people would expect me to put Chris Wood in starting. He scored 20 goals in the Premier League, but I don't think he's going to suit Ange's system at all. He doesn't press enough from the front. He doesn't really have the legs. He doesn't really link up play. What he's good at is sort of being in the box at the right time and scoring goals. I don't know if this is going to work with Ange Postecoglou because Nuno got it out of Chris Wood in a very specific way. And I do like Chris Wood. Look, I'm from New Zealand. I think he's a real good Premier League striker for a certain system, but I think it will be flawed, and for that reason he's on the bench. The striker I've gone with, though, is a young striker, Igor Jesus. Well, I really like what I saw from him at Botafogo. I think he's a big, powerful, young striker, Brazilian, got a bit of pace about him, got a bit of energy about him, can press high up the pitch, and this is more sort of suited to Ange's system. I very much expect it to start with Chris Wood, but I don't think it will end with Chris Wood by the end of the season, and for that reason, I'm putting Igor Jesus as the starting option for Nottingham Forest. I do think, though, for certain games, Chris Wood could be used as the starter. In games in which Forest aren't going to look to press as high and they're not going to have a lot of the ball, I think someone like Chris Wood would actually suit them well because that's more reliant on your striker just to get the ball in the back of the net, and that's what Wood does so well. That's what he's done so well for Forest. So I think games in which they're not looking to press so high, I do think there is very much an argument, and I probably would start with Chris Wood and then maybe finish with someone like Igor Jesus off the bench. So, this would be my starting 11 for Nottingham Forest under Ange Postecoglou, but I think there are certain changes you could definitely make depending on opposition. For example, they are playing Arsenal on the weekend. I would probably start with Chris Wood because I think you could use his ability as just a 9 in the first game. Like, Chris Wood is still a very good striker, so I think you could still use his ability to put the ball in the back of the net, and you won't be so required to press high against Arsenal, and you're more likely to sit in. So I think Chris would be a very good choice. I think you could take Douglas Luiz out, bring in Anderson into that midfield, get his energy in the midfield, obviously just a bit more further forward, and then you could bring Sangare in. Sangare can sort of be more of a shield. That can then drop the defensive line back because you've sort of got a really solid sort of anchor/6, sort of just allowing then the attackers to do what they want. I think these are a couple of changes you could definitely make to make Forest better against the better sides and allow them to set up tactically more astute. Then sort of just looking at sort of Nottingham Forest's depth. This is sort of all of Forest's depth that they have. So in the centre halves, you've got Marotti and you've got Murillo. Then you've got sort of Milinkovic, Jarkunya, Aboli. Then you've got into the defensive minded midfield, you've got Dominguez, Yates, Sangare. You've got Sells, John Victor, Gunn. Then you've got Bakawu, who can also play further forward. I did have him at right back originally, but I should have had him further forward. You've also got that Serena, who can also play right back there if you want. Then you've got Zinchenko, you've got Williams, who are very good at inverting into the middle of the pitch. Then you've got Anderson, who can play there, Douglas Luiz, you've got Gibbs, you've got Gibbs White, you've got McAtee, you've got Kalamudu Manga, who's that new striker who can also play at the left. They've got Hudson-Odoi, you've got Wood, you've got Jesus, you've got Awoniyi. This is all very good attacking depth for Nottingham Forest as they try to get back into Europe, but also win the Europa League. And I think that is some positive that Ange Postecoglou can take, is that attacking depth. But where am I concerned for Ange? I'm concerned for this sort of back three, just sort of goalies, the goalie and the defence, because that's what set Forest between the other Premier League sides last year, was their brilliant defending. And I'm not so convinced it's going to be so easy under a manager like Postecoglou. So I think that's a concern. I also think injuries could ramp up, as we saw with Spurs last year. Lots of hamstring injuries, and I don't think that was really just a coincidence. So that's where I'm actually concerned for Nottingham Forest. Where do I think they'll finish? I'm going to continue. I still think they might finish around 13th, 14th, but I would say I think they're better off. They might be more likely to win a trophy this year. I still, however, don't think they would have been better off sacking Nuno. And if you're going to sack Nuno, I think you're better off getting a manager like Mourinho. And if you want to win it like sort of Ange Postecoglou's got this persona of being, then get in, first of all, probably you'd argue more of a winner in Mourinho, but also someone that could really adapt to the system. We know that Marinakis sort of wants to change the football that Forest play to make it more attacking, but that doesn't necessarily mean more success, and most likely you could be sacrificing some league positions. And at the end of the day, this football is about winning, not just playing lovely football. But I think the one thing that Forest then allowed them to do was sort of make themselves more like appealing to attacking players and talented players, because like, look at the system I get to play in under Postecoglou. But please do let me know my thoughts on this video. Do you agree? Do you think this is how Ange Postecoglou is going to get the best out of this Nottingham Forest side, or do you think he's going to do something slightly different? I do hope that Postecoglou will adapt more than he has done in the past with Nottingham Forest. I think there are just a couple of little sort of changes he can make to make it just so much better for Forest than it was at Tottenham. But if you do like this video, please like and subscribe, as it really helps me grow this channel.